Hey guys, welcome to another session of RBTL, or Reading Between the Lines. I haven't done one of these in a very long time. I was planning to skip this one, the June 8th balance adjustment preview, but some of the guys on my Twitch stream were like, yeah, we still kind of want to see what you think. So I did a reading over it, like on the stream, the live stream, and so for those of you who are watching this video and you're watching that, you most likely have the same thoughts, except maybe a couple new, theory crafts or whatever. But either way, I like this list. All right, so at first when I looked at it, I'm just like, oh man, it's not super inspiring, but I think I'm okay with it. I think this buff is making usable heroes more usable, and so like it seems underwhelming, like the writing, and then really unusable heroes to be like extremely usable. Maybe -1, but of course I'll get to that. So in our list here we have LQC, we have Little Queen Charlotte, Spirit Eye Celine, Jack-O, Summer Break Charlotte, Sharun, Arunka, Assassin Cartuja. And then artifacts, we have Wings of Light and Shadow, sort of Winter Shadow, a lot of shadows, and then the Iron Fan. Okay, so let's talk about it. So Little Queen Charlotte, you know what? I think in her place right now, she's not super bad. Little Queen Charlotte is generally picked into, speaking of World Arena, she's still good into Dark Elemental heroes. I think if people stack too many Dark Elemental heroes and they don't have some kind of strip, attack down, like hand guy, generally she's still a big threat, right? Because if she's sitting at near base speed with a lot of bulk and she brings mitigation to the team and there's an Aureus, like she's still pretty scary versus some dark targets. So she's kind of like still a decent bruiser. And I think mainly like the buff here, as you can see, damage dealt against dark elemental target is increased. I think it's an aim at mainly like APOC Ravi, and at the most maybe like something really tanky with like an ROL, like full barrier. Like so in terms of like LQC with an attack buff, sometimes depending on the situation can still miss a kill on a really well built A Ravi on Proof of Valor. So the very fact that they're just outright just buffing the straight damage for the S3, no additional stuff to the kit, means that they know that LQC's kit is still pretty good. CR boost if she gets attack, a critical hit on her, has innate crit damage mitigation, has AoE team damage mitigation, and then S1 self immunity. While it still hits pretty hard, mostly due to Hellcutter, her main play is really that S3. So here's a couple things I think that LQC, one, this damage dealt, like, does this kill an APOC Ravi with like 4 or 5 Hellcutter stacks attack buff? Maybe. I'm not quite sure what this means, but depending on how much the damage is dealt, I think what is interesting is that some people could offset some of the crit damage into more attack. So using LQC more for the splash damage rather than the individual, like, okay, let's nuke out their sole dark damage dealer in one turn. Maybe this can be compensated with higher attack, so the splash damage becomes more usable for, like, let's say squishier targets. So like right now maybe something like Aiden would be in that kind of highly picked but low HP, high survival range. So that's something that I was thinking of, but again, this is to do with like how much damage does this deal with. And at the end of the day, if it can one-shot APOC Ravi on a Proof of Valor, then I think most people will go for whatever is the highest benefit. So like 4k attack, 300 crit damage, Hellcutter, fully stacked attack buffed. You can't, when you take out APOC Ravi, it's usually like that's pretty much it, right? Because like APOC is really the reason why so many teams can last so long. So if this deals with the 30% damage mitigation in place of a 30% extra damage, this is going to be pretty amazing. But that's pretty much it for LQC. Overall, even if it doesn't make her more usable, it's a 1-for-1. Like if APOC Ravi is chosen in the right circumstance, LQC can be chosen, and they're both equal threats. So I think the buff itself is fine, but whether this buff influences her use that much more, I will be kind of on the reserve, because I don't think her main issue is that she can't kill APOC Ravi. Given enough turns, I think she definitely can. anyway. But next one, Spirit Eye Celine. So this is a pretty big change, I think, for her. The nimble sword being at 35% chance before, and then if they had the possessed buff, it doubles, and so you would have only 70%. Now, during when I was using Spirit Eye Celine, that was a long time ago. Let's say for Guild War or something like that, I can actually miss my kills if I just get unlucky and don't get the nimble sword. So now that the buff is 50%, means that with the possessed buff, it is doubled, it's 100% now, which is great. So that means she innate has that 35% defense pen and no more RNG, so low hits, low lifesteal, but also the possession absorbed amount is also increased. So that's pretty nice. I think you will probably still never heal as much as like Celine on a lifesteal set. We'll have to definitely see how much this heals, but I think this definitely makes Celine more aggressive in play, and I think I think speed set, pen set will be her best in slot. And you know what, even if you're depending on what kind of anti-cleave you're bringing her into, perhaps even speed set immunity, like high speed damage with immunity, is not even that bad. So I think Spirit Eye Celine's like countermeasure is kind of gonna be like Abigail, who is gonna be released. It's like she's gonna be, well, actually, sorry, let me rephrase that. Spirit Eye Celine's pick like priority in a draft is generally late. So I think that this can make her one of the staples into anti-cleave, especially if she is using Green Celine's artifact to cut the turn. Today I was just being like, okay, because now Nimble Sword is going to always have 100% after I get possession, then you know the damage can technically be lower, right? Of course you want as much damage as possible, but you can make it really fast, and then with Celine's artifact you can cut pretty much anything that has a 2-turn skill, or sorry, a non-attack skill. So I think that's how I would see her. I think this is Smaugie's intention, is like, even in this patch alone, in the next hero we'll talk about, they're buffing aggro. And Spirit Eye Celine, because of the way that she reacts, is she's still like a reactive protective hero, so she would be anti-aggro, anti-cleave. So in the same patch, they buff someone that will be really good for aggro. They're also buffing someone that is good for anti-aggro, anti-cleave. So I think Celine's buff will make her more used, and I already see her picked sometimes as a counter pick anyway. So I think with her buff, I think her priority is going to be pretty decent, especially for people who can't speed contest. Now going for the first Covenant, RGB 5, Jack-O on initial release was very, I remember, I think I gave her like a decent review when she was released. I myself, I remember I pulled I think I have an S at the moment. It was strictly just because I think at that time there was a dry slump in Epic 7, which, you know, often happens, but it was like, it's limited, so I go a bit crazy, you know, refresh Garo, and right, and I don't remember how many artifacts I have. I don't think I have a max limit broken one. But either way, now after this buff, I am actually kind of glad that I got her. So let's read this first. I got her multiple copies rather. So the only change here would be this part, right? So after an ally attacks, when the target has a debuff, increases combat readiness of the caster by 30%. This effect is activated after all the attacker's effects have occurred and can only be activated once every 3 turns. Now the once every 3 turns part obviously means that you're using Jack-O into a team where you're not asking for a lifeline, you're not expecting to live again. So unless you have someone like Spirit Eye Celine, or someone like a Revive, or in the near future Abigail, right? So like clearly, and also the self-propelling CR boost is going to be huge too. Chain of Chiron, after attacking inflicts a random debuff instead of after attacking has a 25% chance to stun a target for 1 turn. So before, like, you know, the play used to be something like, you know, Jack-O with Payra, Jack-O with Ran or something because of the back row. So you're hoping that you would get a stun after doing an AoE strip, right? So, you know, that ended up not really working too well because like if you don't land it, and then Jack-O didn't really do much. You know, when the target is stunned, increase combat readiness, but if you don't get it, it's really, really bad. But now it's when a target is debuffed, increases her own combat readiness, and then so and 30%, so it's pretty big. And then any debuff, it's any debuff. So now chain of Chiron affects a random one, stun, which is still there, which is great, and it's 100%, right? So it's insanely crazy now. Like the proc condition versus what is available here, there is no percentile, right? So you can add 100% stun, 100% cannot be buffed, decrease hit chance, restrict, and then on the target for 1 turn. It cannot be dispelled. So at the start, right, at the start of the battle. So right now I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh man, this is pretty loaded, because based on this reading, I would imagine something like, if let's say you have green Leica, you S2 like Landy, and the Landy is the one in the back row, and someone doesn't have immunity, and you land a debuff, like technically doesn't that cut Jack-O as well? Because like it's after an ally attacks, and I don't know how that would apply actually. Maybe it has to be on their turn, right? But it says ally attack. Sometimes they say like ally attack on their turn is very specific. So I almost feel like this means that anyone who gets the opportunity to attack, who has the Chain of Chiron buff, and they can land the debuff, it's going to be insanely good. Another thing would be like even someone that can strip into a debuff, and not like Ran or Payra, but let's say a bit slightly standardy comp, right? Or even like Pirate Captain Flan, hand guy. Like these guys can all be someone that can actually push up Jack-O. It just depends on your opponent, of course. You don't want to, you know, use them as initiators if your opponents are running like Rans and stuff like that. But in terms of like speed priority, if you know in your draft you have the highest speed, maybe Jack-O is not even that bad. So I'm not just saying that she'll work in Ran drafts, you know, all that kind of stuff. And even C. Lilius technically can work, right? Because C. Lilius, you can S3, S1, and then you could bring her up, and Jack-O would have vigor buff. So like Jack-O right now looks to be like, how this works is like the more beefed up Edda or Ida, single target of course. But anyways, 30%. So just keep those things in mind. It's like, it's actually pretty insane because we have too many openers that can actually make her work, right? So Payra, Ran, C. Lilius easy. Leica, depending on if the opponents have immunity, you know, and then it goes from there, right? Technically Athletica could do it as well. Athletica S2. Like I just feel Jack-O is insane for like openers right now, which is really good for the meta in terms of the aggro meta, but it might not be good for the game's meta because people are kind of tired of aggro, or at least that's what I hear. Forever Illusion Driver. So we'll look at the Awakened version. Increases the attack of the caster for 2 turns before attacking the enemy. So you know what? When I was reading the buff, I was like, what? She has this? But you know what? I never got to enjoy it because Jack-O was so bad that I just never knew that she had a self-attack buff. Like in terms of, maybe I knew it initially, but it's been like what, like a whole year, almost 2 years. Like I totally forgot about it. So now if you think about the self-propelling CR boost into the damage that she can do, increased attack for 2 turns. She has a self-attack imprint. So if you have had benefits of pulling imprints like myself, and then when an enemy is defeated, increases the combat readiness of the caster, of the allies by 20%, grants an extra turn to the caster, and it also penetrates the defense by 50%. So like overall, it's pretty loaded. She reminds me of, like, you know, even she reminds me of Ida for the CR boost. Reminds me of someone like Giselle, because Giselle technically can't function without a CR boost either, but she's self-attack buffs, and then she has 50% defense pen, but not the damage sheer ignore that Giselle has. And then she'll probably be on pen set. And then you can increase combat readiness. It reminds me of top model Luluka. And it increases, and it grants another turn if you kill. So the S1, I don't remember what the mods are, but the S1 can still do some damage. And so like it's like kind of like a mix of all these heroes together. So in my opinion, she's like, you know, she beats Giselle out of the water. And also keep in mind she can still have access to Merciless Glutton because she's a warrior. So she also reminds me of Yufine in that sense. Except Yufine, you need to soul burn to attack buff, right? And so and Yufine gets pumped up by only silence, but she gets pumped up by every debuff. So there's so many heroes that, like, on its own are already somewhat threatening, but they're limited to who they're partnered with. But Jack-O is like unleashed by almost every single meta hero right now. She just is that extra element that really spices up your day, you know? Like if all the meta heroes are the ice cream sundae, she's the cherry on top. It's actually like that. And damage dealt increase. Damage dealt also increase, like WTF. So the very fact that she gets a 30% CR boost doesn't mean, it means that she doesn't have to be that fast. So that means all your stats can be put into damage. And then of course, Merciless Glutton, I think, gonna be a decent best in slot almost, just because it increases damage dealt, not critical hit damage like Draco Plate. Increases damage dealt by 16%, I believe, and then increases certain amount of combat readiness if you kill. So the whole assumption is that it just gels well with this. So to be honest, I don't have one full max limit broken Merciless Glutton. It's on my Yufine right now. Like, I think Jack-O is going to take that priority, and I think I'm going to ungear my Yufine, because Yufine's much harder to use compared to someone like Jack-O, who is going to be amazing in my opinion. Definitely let me know what you guys think about Jack-O, because I'm pretty sure we'll be on the same page there. Summer Break Charlotte. So I read this 2-3 times, and I was trying to make sense of it. It's like, are they aiming for her to be usable in PvP in terms of RTA? Now, I'm not 100% convinced about this. I can't see it, but let's just go through it, and then maybe you guys correct me, of course, if I'm wrong, but maybe she's just better for PvE? I don't know. Unfortunate though, because I mean, she's coming back this summer, I'm sure. So like the very fact that they're buffing her, this better be an insane buff, and I must have been missing something, otherwise it's kind of a waste, right? So the only difference that's changed here is increasing the combat range to 25%. So four attacks versus 5. Oh, sorry, 4 attacks versus 5 attacks to generate another turn. We're talking about over the longevity of her fight. So of course anything with higher combat readiness is good. So immediately on paper, 1-for-1, it's better. Adult's responsibility after increases hit chance by 30%. So you're gaining more stats, which means that you can alleviate that and put it into either more damage or more bulk or more speed if you need speed. At the start of the first battle, gains 16 fighting spirit and grants enhanced dual attack to the caster. At the end of every 4 ally turns, grants enhanced dual attack to the caster. So at least the thing is that she starts with it. So, but the thing is, like, her damage mods were never that good. So like if you think about her, let's say you go into maybe a C. Lilius or anyone that is an opener, like, will she do enough damage? Only time will tell. Like maybe Ran S2, S3 defense break full team S1, pull her, and then maybe she kills the entire team if she's full damage, no bulk, maybe. But I think the gaining the enhanced dual attack on the beginning of the turn is helpful. I just think that, like, if people are tanking down, I don't think she'd be your first damage dealer you would go with, you know what I mean? So that's why I'm like kind of having a bit of a struggle on what her role is. Whale, hello there. Before damage dealt increased proportions of the target's lost health, and now she's no longer a turn cooldown hero, she's a fighting spirit hero. Dispels all debuffs from the caster, and then attacks the enemy with a pod of killer whale, stunning for 1 turn, penetrates the target's defense by 50%. So the thing is, before at the start of the turn when fighting spirit is full, consumes all fighting spirit dispelling. I feel like there is something better about this because it feels like if you can, well, I guess you can't get her fighting spirit if she's stunned, right? So what I was about to say was that if she's immobilized, then she has to actually cast it to dispel, whereas this is fighting spirit. Sorry, she had always been fighting spirit, my bad. Yeah, I just felt like this was more automatic, but I was thinking, no, I don't think that works. The way she gains fighting spirit is still based on the S1, so I guess if she's stunned and immobilized, it wouldn't gain anyway, so she wouldn't dispel it. So I guess it's about the same thing. So if she's slept, stunned, then she can't dispel it, but if she's not, any other debuff, she'll dispel it and then penetrate the target's defense by 50%. So it's increased damage, I think, overall, because it's all situations, whereas before it's just the target's lost health. So it's like eh. And I remember it was pretty powerful when they got lower HP, but it was just like, that was super circumstantial, right? Like the way this works to get your S3 up and like to get the kill shot, it's harder to predict, whereas something like a 50% pen slapped on is really good in terms of like it's what's needed. But speaking of the 50% defense pen though, I mean, are you guys tired about defense pen? It's either ignore damage tier or defense pen ultimates now, because that's how the power creep is, right? Like there's a certain thing where like they're not changing the damage mods, but there's just like, oh yeah, just negate a stat, the defense stat, by giving defense pen, or negate Aureus by giving damage tier. It's almost like this for every single damage dealer now, which is great, right? Like again, that's what these heroes need, but it's like it's kind of boring too. So, but anyways, that's just a side thing. Otherwise, everything else is the same. Attack, speed up for everyone else. But other people who have said that, you know, those who use Summer Break Charlotte in Expos, she's a better version of it. And I would say, oh yeah, I would say yes. But it's like, I feel like it would be a waste if she is just stuck with Expo again. So hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully she is usable in something like World Arena. Now Sharun. Okay, Sharun for me is gonna be the next hero that I'm excited about in this whole list. Alright, so out of all the ones we covered, including the MLs, my most excited is Jack-O and Sharun. Sharun, I think, is going to be very, very good for standard players and almost best in slot versus a lot of what's going on right now. So like Last Rider Crow, you know, A-Ravi pickers, hand guy pickers, like these are pretty staple for like bulk players, right? And so Sharun is gonna turn the tables on that. So I think she's gonna be very, very solid there. Actually usable, and I'm glad I although I skipped her banner, I did get lucky on some kind of like so the 70 free summons or like a green elemental summon. I got a Sharun or two actually out of it, and then I benched her. So after seeing this, I immediately 6-starred her and I bought her EE. All right, so more on the EE in a bit. So we have first things first. If you look at this, so at the end of the turn, grant a random buff. Let me say, at the end of the enemy's turn, for each buff granted to the enemy, 5% chance of increasing the combat readiness up to 20%. Okay, so thinking about Hand Guy, think about Last Rider Crow, think about these heroes that will really benefit Sharun into. They're gonna be buffing, and you might get a combat readiness boost. All right, so before I used to rate this pretty bad because it's really RNG, right? But it's good enough, all right? So each buff granted to the enemy has a 5% chance, so it's not terrible. At the end of the turn, grants a random buff and a barrier to the ally except for the caster for the high attack with the high attack for 2 turns. All right, and then barrier strength increases proportional to the caster's max health. Now think about this. In the skill itself, this was 1 turn before, but 2 turns unless you're a damage dealer is like almost 2.5 times the speed of Sharun, and that's not saying that she gets a CR boost. You're most likely gonna have your barrier up the entire time, right? So if you think about that, that's actually pretty nuts, especially if you put some kind of like high damage hero in the backline with really good sustain, something like Sylvan Sage Vivian. That would be like insanely good to pair with Sharun. Like if you're worried about more like squishy heroes, again, I'm gonna bring up Abigail. Abigail is gonna make that so easy as well. You can put the highest attacker in the back line, and then you have this barrier for 2 turns. So after your opponents burst down all their damage onto your backliner highest attack hero, you have protection with barrier. And not only that, it can be Landy with guiding light in the back, so it's really hard to knock her out. It just feels like it's so good, you know what I mean? So first things first, that's the 2-turn barrier is insanely high value, okay? And then the random buff now. So before it used to be increased critical hit chance, increased critical hit damage, and a continuous healing. Now it's increased critical hit damage, increased speed, immunity, right? So, oh, sorry, missed the attack. That was the same. So critical hit chance had always been a weird one for me. I had remembered actually commenting on it, like, who would benefit from this? Like, you're running 100% crit anyway, and if you don't, are you gonna bank on the RNG for Sharun to give you the crit chance? So if you think about a Bellion, right? Bellion's self buff, the best one is continuous healing, which is definitely something that is lacking here. I definitely think that if they kept continuous healing on Sharun, it would make her so good to near OP, right? So, but everyone has that, has the experience of facing a Bellion, whether it was back in Guild War or Arena Defense or RTA, where that Bellion getting that continuous heal, giving her an extra life with that defense buff was so annoying, right? So I think they had to remove it. But regardless, all of these buffs are insanely good for your damage dealer, right? So I think now they have a better plan, strategy for Sharun and what she's going to do, like what her role is supposed to be. And I think this is really just giving a lifeline to squishier damage dealers like Landy and stuff like that, but can go into stealth, can go into some type of protection, whether that from an external source or internal source, like Roy, for example. How do you kill Roy like this, right? Like there's a lot of play with this. It's just this buff, all right? And then You May Perish, let's take a look at the awakened version. Attacks all enemies, decreasing buff duration by 2 turns before inflicting decreased speed and venom for 2 turns. And increase combat range of the cast by 50%. Nutty nuts, okay? That's too many nuts. Attacks all enemies, decrease buff for 1 turn. Before, this was like pretty bad, right? You got Hand Guy, and then you have Last Rider Crow now. Well, they would basically just skip the Venom turn, right? So that means her S3 was always kind of conflicting with some of the best immunity buffers or even cleansers for that case. But now, decreasing the buff duration for 2 turns, inflicting so this just negates Hand Guy completely, unless Hand Guy soul burns, right? So unless Hand Guy soul burns, it's 3-turn buff. This will just strip the immunity and the attack buff. Last Rider Crow, it attacks the enemy first, right? So I guess it would actually still remove the barrier. Actually, that sounds pretty amazing to me. So it removes immunity, removes the barrier, or maybe before he casts immunity. But regardless, if you got the Venom on and no cleanse, it doesn't matter if Last Rider Crow got the immunity. But most likely Last Rider Crow will have the turn before Sharun, unless you build an insanely different type of Sharun. For the decreased speed, very, very good for her turn cycling, and then you gain combat range by another 50%. So I feel like overall she is like she's gonna be really good, okay? If she's going to make her spot in the meta just so good, in my opinion. Sharun is also not insanely squishy. She has insanely high defense, and then like HP is kind of low, but you know, overall it's still really, really nice. S1, of course, if she gains a 50% CR boost and have speed down from the S3, May You Perish, the S1 also has a Venom chance, 75%. And also, actually, I forgot about this. If the target is inflicted with Venom, it increases the skill cooldowns by 1 turn. That was another thing that was actually really amazing too. That was part of her kit that I liked originally, but it was everything else that made the S1 kind of hard to use. So Sharun, I think, is gonna be built with some effectiveness, ER for sure, and then maybe on counter set. So if you have insanely good Banshee gear like you would give to DDR, Death Dealer Ray, I think you could give this to her as well. Hopefully you have 2 sets. If you soul burn her S1, increases the effect chance to 100%, inflicting venom for 2 turns. So it's pretty nuts. Now, I was talking about her EE. Her EE, she has 3, obviously. The S3 one decreases cooldown of May You Perish by 1 turn. It's already a short turn cooldown. It's only 4 turns base. So if you Mola to +3, it's 4 turn. And then you take the EE, May You Perish, it's 3 turn cooldown. With speed down, with CR boosting, can you imagine what kind of havoc she can bring? I feel like she would have more tempo than someone like DDR, and DDR's tempo is actually decent, but she has more tempo than DDR, which is pretty nuts. In terms of artifact, I don't know. I mean, Guardian Ice Crystals might be just a good standard. It's just a nice to have. I know that some people used to run Celestine Sharun on counter set. That could also be good. Based on her turn cycling, she might not need Guardian Ice Crystals, right? So like DDR or other slower Soul Weavers usually need Guardian Ice Crystal because they need to heal when it's not their turn, right? But Sharun does so many like weird combat readiness RNG that, you know, she might get the turn. 20% is not nothing, right? She might get the turn and then slowing down your opponents. Like if she keeps getting the turn and she's counter and Celestine, maybe she has that benefit as well. I don't know what artifact I want to go with her yet, but I just do feel that she is really, really good. Someone you really want to consider building. I think the other EEs that she has aren't as good, so I probably won't talk about that too much, to be honest. She has a S1 EE, or sorry, her passive EE. One of them is increasing combat readiness of the caster by an additional 5%. So it's, I mean, it would be this one, so it would be 25. I don't know. I feel that the turn cooldown would be better. Just keeping that pressure on with strips and debuff. Yeah. Anyways, enough of me talking about Sharun, because I again, like I said, Sharun and Jack-O are 2 of my most excited heroes. I feel like they bring a new level of coolness to the table that I can really get with, and also gives me more build, what do you call it, goals, right? Setting goals and objectives to build. Now, okay, so Arunka is gonna be a quick one. I feel like Arunka is, I don't know. I personally don't know how I feel about this buff. So this patch is definitely like an up and down, up and down, up and down. So before it increases the attack of the caster by 2 turns, there's no attack buff anymore. Now, one can say that, well, the damage dealt to the barrier is increased, but I don't know if there's a world where attack buff is worse. Sorry, attack buff is worse than this, or this is better than attack buff. You know what I mean? I feel like they're just hoping that you'll run an attack buffer with Arunka. So I'm only skeptical, but I'll definitely be open-minded to see like how much more damage this does, right? So are we talking about like Hua Yang level damage? But Hua Yang needs attack buff to kill certain targets, right? So I was explaining this on the live stream when I was discussing this patch. But basically what I find is that Arunka, if they're gonna keep siding on the barrier gimmick, there's not many heroes that do have barrier on the like at the start of the turn. One would be ROL. Either she's protecting light elemental or she herself is barriered. Sure, she can benefit from it. The other is FCC, which is not highly played. FCC is still pretty good because the Last Rider Crow is back, you know, but it's not, it just doesn't feel like Arunka's kit is meant to deal with stuff like that is meta at the moment. Yes, you will run into people with barriers, but there's a lot of times like you can't even count in protection set because a lot of people don't necessarily run protection set. Or actually, I think there was like is it a Japanese player or an Asia player recently, I think, posted an account review. He made legend. He had like I think it was like a protection set Briar Witch Assyria, protection set Assyria, protection set a lot of things. And it's like, yes, that can work, but how would you know to draft Arunka into that? So this makes, one, it makes the buff itself skeptical, and the second thing would be like, well, they're not really improving how versatile she will be in, right? You know what I mean? So like, I feel like Ilanav in the previous patch was a decent, like I was wrecked by a couple Ilanavs. Just because she can just do so much injury and so much damage actually, and so Ilanav found a place. Now I'm just more questionable about like Arunka. So if she's gonna be, you know, focused on barrier gimmicks, then that lowers her play, I think. Or maybe Sharun, I guess. You know, I just talked about Sharun's barrier and saying how good that is. Maybe that's it, but I do feel like it's a bit underwhelming, and we'll see though. We'll see. I mean, I do have her in case she is good. Assassin Cartuja. Now this is a whole level of crazy for 4-star ML that most likely everyone has. This, when I saw this, I was like, what are they doing? Like Jack-O buff is already insane, but let's talk about this evasion thing. Yeah. First things first, Shred is now no longer bleed, which had been super ineffective for the longest time. But you have now a 75% chance to provoke for 1 turn. So that's the S1. The S3 still does a stun and defense break. So like Assassin Cartuja, in terms of like a support, not even counting the evasion, he's already increased like tenfold with just this. Now let's talk about the evasion. Before, increase the evasion of all allies by 15% when to cast his end, blah blah blah. Okay, I'm just gonna ignore that. But look at this. So evasion 50% innate. Okay, and then also increase the evasion of all allies except the caster by 20%. Before we get to it, he does have an EE that gets buffed. He has an additional 20%, which means on the field he has a 70% chance to evade. If he successfully evades, increases combat rate by 15%. Pretty nutty. I think that on a counter set, he's not even a joke, because counter set means that they're prone to potentially get provoke locked, so they won't touch him. But if he's on the field, he brings so much benefit. People used to build him as a bruiser, and he has a pretty decent S3 damage mod if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, I don't know what kind of build, but even like a slight bit of damage, but I think bulk is higher priority now, because like assuming he dodges and, you know, cuts turns and all that kind of stuff, this 75% chance to provoke is pretty nuts. So that's very, very nice. I mean, if there was like another Warhorn on him, might not be terrible, but I think if you're cheap or you're on the more budget side, something like the Randall might still be pretty good for him, just so he gets more CR boost at a certain HP. Snow Crystal might also be a decent option as well, but I mean, there's so many heroes that actually can use Snow Crystal right now. I'm actually surprised. But so many heroes can actually use Snow Crystal right now. So you might not have enough for Assassin Cartuja, but bring a 20% extra to the table, meaning Aiden's, Remnant Violets, they have 90% evasion, which means currently nothing can actually deal with them, like guarantee a hit, right? To my knowledge. So Zahhak would have what, an additional 50% with, Zahhak, Briar Witch, if they're on hit chance artifacts, would have the best chance to hit these guys, but yet they still can't hit them. I'm thinking, so you guys can leave this in the comment down below. I'm only forgetting, but does Wanda have a higher hit chance? Discounting the hit chance buff, discounting the hit buff, to a debuff, a target debuff. She might actually still be able to hit them. But either way, I think Wanda has the highest chance to hit, and if she can't do it innately, then for sure putting a hit artifact on her, like Andre's crossbow, cheaper version than Misha, will be able to hit. But I mean, it's like, will you use her? Not quite sure. I'm not quite sure about that. Either way, so yeah, I feel like this is pretty nuts. And then the imprint concentration as well, having effectiveness for the provoke, I think no brainer, right? Removing 14% attack. With his attack at that time, I think it was pretty low too, like 1,000 max. Like, I don't think any higher than that. So I think Assassin Cartuja's buff as it is very, very powerful. Do I like it? Probably not. I don't like the encouragement of evasion heroes and then them making heroes have higher hit chance. I just feels like it just feels like it's like its own separate teeter-totter, or is it called seesaw? You guys know what I'm talking about. It's just back and forth. It's just hit chance evasion, hit chance evasion. But those systems feel so boring compared to some of the other systems. You know what I mean? Like it's just literally like, does it hit or does it not? And I think the buff is great, but it's just more of like kind of boring. So it's a good buff. I think 8 cards gonna be built and a lot of people are gonna spam it. Artifact 5-star, Wings of Light and Shadow, increase critical hit chance by 15%. When attacking, if a critical hit is made, increase the damage of the next attack by 10 to 20%. So this one is a night artifact for one. So I personally am not like I'm not sold on this. I'm not 100% sure who this would be best in slot for. I think if you're not running like Fire Charlotte or something like that on mature sunglasses for mitigation, this might be next best thing, because I mean, I guess you don't need a critical hit chance, so I don't know. I didn't like the look of this artifact, although I feel like it is an improvement of the previous. So in terms of the condition, it is better. It's just that I don't know who would use it at the moment. But that's just my issue, right? You guys can figure that out. Sword of Winter Shadow. So this is Rand's artifact. Increases attack by 15%. When using a non-attack skill, has a 50 to 100%, so you need to max it. Chance to gain 10 souls and remove 10 souls from the enemy. But soul can only be acquired once. So this makes me feel like, okay, again, question is who can use this? If you're gaining only 10 souls, Rand's teams generally need 20 souls. Like if you're gonna go with Rand cleaving, generally you need 20 souls off the bat, and then maybe 20 souls to finish off. So maybe multiple book holders. You're only getting 10 souls and you can only gain it once, which means that it won't be good for PvE either. Or maybe it's just good for like PvE, like an Advent side story where it's like a very linear run, but like a 10 soul difference is a difference of a kill. That maybe, but even then I'm just like not sure. So I mean, for sure I don't think this goes on to a Ran. I think it's a bit wasted. RNL seems to be one of the best in slots and continue to be the best. Everything else is almost a joke compared to how much RNL can actually like do. So yeah, I'm not sure about this artifact. I do feel the artifacts in general, all three of them, are pretty underwhelming compared to the heroes. So I'll kind of give them a pass, right? Because I think that they did a good job for Sharun. I think they did a good job for Jack-O. And Spirit Eye Celine and LQC. I think those are all good. So I'm not gonna, not gonna rail on them too much for the artifacts. The Iron Fan, this one was a pretty funny one. So you lose the damage dealt, and originally the first thing I thought of was my 3-man Banshee cleave. Sorry, 3-man Banshee one-shot with my Pavel, my green Pavel, was using Iron Fan this entire time. So I was like, wait, am I gonna not get the kill or something? But it turns out I can, because a couple of my stream chat members showed me their Pavels and they can kill and they weren't on Iron Fan, or they had lower damage or something like that. They're just like, oh yeah, just run a portrait on them, it's fine. So anyways, panic resolved. But regardless, it almost feels like it's one useless artifact to another. But again, your comments down below will be very, very nice for me to see, maybe I really did miss something. But after using an attack that targets all enemies except for a basic skill, increases combat range of the caster by 15 to 30%, can only be active once per turn. So the question I had on the live stream was, who can use this? All right, so let's not even talk about Guiding Light taking priority in so many rangers right now. Let's just say who can actually use this and benefit from it. So think about Landy, think about Briar Witch Assyria. This is not you doing an AoE and getting an extra turn. This is you getting 30% for the next turn. So it's like what? So one of my stream members did say that Commander Pavel could work with this if you're base speed. But the thing is, most Commander Pavels are almost base speed anyway. because a 50% cut is huge, right? Which I think he does 50 or 40 or something like that. Insanely high already. The only way he's not making the turn is like a Politis on the field. But would you really put this on him because of Politis? So that becomes like a very, very situational thing. And then on top of the fact that if your Commander Pavel is used for like something like RTA, most likely it's on Guiding Light. Most likely it's on Guiding Light. Or you have the dominating openers and then he gets banned anyway. But realistically, if you're using Commander Pavel into like a Guild War fight or into an arena fight, he's on Dux Noctis because it stacks attack, gives him more damage. So then this artifact then becomes again questionable. So I had I spent like I think a good 10 minutes trying to think about the ranger that would benefit from this. Even a ranger like, let's say Op Sig can push back with the S3 if it's a barrier, but increase the combat rates by 30%. Her pushback is only 30% max, if I remember correctly. It's 20 or 30%. So you're still not getting the turn. Just because your Opsic pushed him back 30%, you gain 30%. Doesn't mean you're getting the next turn. Like, she's going to be outsped by anyone at a base 200 speed. So, like, then that doesn't make sense either. So I don't know, you know, what... It's like, okay, so look at this, right? It had limited uses, lacks significant impact, relegating it to specific PvE content. So I think that was talking about Banshee, okay? To improve its usability, we implement and change the existing effect. The new effect will increase combat range of the caster after performing AoE attack. It's not a basic skill. This modification increases the artifact's usefulness, particularly the ranger heroes who rely on constant AoE attacks. The recall of Iron Fan will be conducted as part of the changes. So I am planning to recall my Iron Fan, but like... Wait, what do we get? We only get... Okay, it doesn't seem good. I don't wanna Either way, clearly they think that it's more usable because CR boost, right? Like everybody knows CR boost is like the it's like the money maker for Epic 7, right? Defense pen and CR boost. But the question is who, right? So I'm confused. I don't know. I can't think of it as a good PvE one. I don't know if it's a good PvP artifact. So all three artifacts, I'd say like it's kind of like lower priority, that's for sure. That's my thoughts on that. Anyways, this has been a really, really long video because I spent so much time talking about Jack-O and Sharun and all that kind of stuff. So I will end this here. If you have watched the entire thing, thank you for watching so much. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Do you agree, disagree with me? Any new ideas, new theory crafts? Let me know. Love to read it. I'll talk to you guys next time. I'm gonna sign off here. If you guys have Discord, check it out. If you guys have not subscribed to YouTube, please help subscribe, like the video. Appreciate it. I'll see you guys next time.